1. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Advukta.
This is Merps. We are really zooming by 2020. Thankfully, it's almost the end of the year. We're almost at the Christmas holiday season. So I hope all of you guys are doing well. But we still got a lot to talk about. Not a lot to talk about. We have some stuff to talk
We
about.
don't
So let's
have
talk
that
about
much
it.
to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
because
Let's
everything's
talk
happening
about
on Monday. There's apparently
it.
some big BG news coming. There's the arena, what do you call it? The actual micro adjust. It's been like a month since the expansion release, and they're doing the first actual micro adjust, or sorry, the first actual offering odds adjustment that will actually balance the classes. So it's been a while, but that's coming for arena. We don't know what's going on with Battlegrounds, but it's apparently going to be pretty big. We see some streamers tweet out some things, hyping it up, and that doesn't usually happen with a small update. And plus, Blizzard needs something big, right? We're just kind of at the point in which Blizzard has totally messed up the last month, and they are doing what they need to do what they can right before the holiday season to make sure they don't crash and burn the entire throughout the holidays. So it's coming. It's coming next week. We don't know what's exactly going to happen. So we'll have more in the meta, in the update information. Next week is going to be a huge week for the Lightforge too, because we're going to have to talk about everything that happened, new arena meta, new Battlegrounds meta, everything. But so this is probably going to be a short Lightforge.
We always say that.
We say
It doesn't always happen that way. But yes, we are definitely looking forward to new content. On the arena side, we've been kind of promised and previewed micro adjustments. Ixar responded to Keldar on Twitter and said it was soon TM, but it was nice to see Ixar acknowledge that.
They made an acknowledgement that it will happen in quote unquote the next patch, at last week. So the next patch is happening Monday.
Yeah. So we will get that, and hopefully, we'll get the balance that we really need in the arena, because it's not exactly fun right now.
I don't know. Okay, here's the thing with the arena. Demon hunters are OP, obviously, right? You see the win rates, you see whatever. I don't face that many demon hunters. It's not like I haven't been playing. I have a decent sample size now. And yes, you do face more demon hunters than you normally would, but I feel like a lot of players just still aren't picking demon hunters. So
people play what they like to play.
Yeah, exactly. And so so many runs go by where I face 2 demon hunters and I make it to 9 or 8 or whatever wins before I'm knocked out by almost majority non-demon hunters. So it's not you guys remember the Demon Hunter meta in the spring when Demon Hunter was first released, when it was literally just all Demon Hunters if you have no losses or 1 loss. All you faced were Demon Hunters. It was the new class, everyone wanted to play it, and it was insanely hyped and insanely powerful. Well, it's almost as powerful as it was before according to win rates, but it is nowhere near as popular. So I don't think the meta is it's definitely as unfair as the win rate suggests, but I don't think it's as bad actually being in the meta. Just because you don't see the Demon Hunters a lot for whatever reason. Maybe it's something to do with the rogue effect, right? Where people just don't like playing stuff that hurts you in the face.
Maybe. So we should be expecting the arena update. We should be expecting a big BG update, because unlike the arena update, the BG update was something that Hearthstone actually tweeted out through their main account. This was on December 11th, which means it was about 2 days ago. The official Hearthstone Twitter account tweeted out that, number 1, they'll be resetting all players' Battleground ratings to 0 early next week.
No, my hard-earned 3K.
Your hard-earned 3K. I'm sorry, dude. In order to level the playing field for a new content update. And then they had the little sideways looking eyes emoji. So let's unpack this for a second. Resetting all players' ratings to 0. And then Blizzard further elaborated that they are trying to fix this MMR problem where the top players on the leaderboard right now have bugged MMR, whether intentionally or not. But if you look at just the top 3 on North America right now, Vague Rabbit at 22.7k MMR, Test MMR at 22k flat, and then Wumbo Style at a paltry 18.7k MMR. It has been confirmed that all 3 of these accounts are bugged. And what that means is that if you take someone like Victor, who is at a noob like 16k and is
Mm.
sitting at 6th place, like so bad, right? Victor, terrible player.
I mean, Victor
Victor,
is so much worse than 10 MMR. It's like the distance between me and Victor is probably the same as the distance between Victor and Test MMR.
it is. It actually is. Right. So that's the skill gap there,
Yeah.
obviously. And actually, no, it should be bigger, right? Because it's even harder to
Yeah,
get
it
from,
goes up
way
exponential
harder.
or whatever it is. Actually,
Right,
the
right.
problem is that it doesn't go up exponentially. It goes up like way. I mean, it is exponential, but it's like
Yeah.
not. It's not as exponential as it needs to be.
Yeah, it's very strange. But so the problem is that when Victor gets first place, he gains about 50 to 60 MMR per first place. Meanwhile, when you see Vague Rabbit, who's Sapphire, and he streams on Twitch, or if you see Wumbo, who also streams on Twitch, and they get a first place, they're getting still 100 points or more. Um, consistently, like if they get first place. So basically every single, and when they lose, they don't lose as much as Victor does, or someone like Dog, right, who is 12th on the leaderboards. So every single game that they're playing, they're basically being just spotted 40 MMR.
Hmm.
That's a huge difference. That's like it makes it such that the MMR system is a joke. Like it is beyond a farce, and it has frustrated a lot of people. It's frustrated the top players. Some of the people who have bugged MMRs have been pretty transparent about it. Others have not, and it's made even someone like me, who I'm not as good as like Dog or Victor, but I look at this and I'm like, what is the point of me even caring about the leaderboards at all, right? I went up to like number 70 in NA, and now I'm at like number 140 because I just haven't been playing or something. Yeah, I'm right now I'm at 146, and it's just because like there's really no point, right? Like there's no carrot in front of you.
Yeah, because you don't even
There's
get
really no
like
point.
you don't even get rewards for playing Battlegrounds. Like you're not even
No,
like earning gold or whatever. I guess now you're earning EXP, but God, it's so the disjoint between earning EXP and earning actual rewards is so like I don't even think about earning EXP as earning rewards, even though you are earning rewards. Like that's how badly they screwed up this whole reward system revamp thing. But yeah. Um, so yeah, there's really no incentive for top players to play Battlegrounds besides for the love of the game and
for the
to
love
improve
of the game.
yourself.
And to improve yourself. But okay, so the issue that we have with this announcement that Blizzard made, they're like, "Oh, we're resetting everyone's MMR down to 0." What this implies is that all they're doing is resetting your external MMR to 0.
Hmm.
They have stated, and I believe it was Ixar who stated that the people who were able to have bugged MMR through intentionally or unintentionally exploiting the system will no longer be able to do it. We'll see if that's possible. But a lot of people are number one clamoring to have this disconnect not happen anymore. It's like, why do you need an internal versus external MMR kind of thing?
I mean,
And
that's okay.
and
We'll
number
talk about
two,
that after.
yeah. And number two, they're annoyed at this just grind of, okay, wait, you're resetting everyone back to 0 and you're just forcing people to climb back to where they were, and
Hmm.
then the grind continues. Like this gradual climb to, like, okay, I know people are at 22k, but even if they played quote fair, like someone would be at like 16.5, 17k by now, right? uh and that is a lot more than where we ended the first season, which I believe was like around 15k. And this constant creep is going to happen. And what you're essentially doing is like, okay, yeah, we're back to 0. We're resetting. But if the internal MMR stays the same, this creep, this inflation, it'll always happen. And then you're just saying like, oh man, I need to create like artificial barriers and just
Well,
it's
it's because
empty
their MMR
calories.
system doesn't
Yeah,
work. Like, and they
yeah,
haven't, like, they may not have fixed it, right? It's not that
no,
easy to fix
no,
an MMR system when you're dealing with like complex game stuff. Like, they actually have like mathematicians, math PhDs, and people working at Blizzard who's doing this, and they really should be doing a better job. I'm not saying this stuff isn't hard, but it's stuff that a lot of games, including Blizzard games, have figured out to a degree better than this. So yeah, I
that's the
know it's a
thing.
beta, but like they're either in super experimental mode and failing completely, or like they're just trying. Like I imagine they must be trying something that should have this like really good effect if it worked, and it's just kind of not working, or maybe it's working in like the middle, right, or the bottom, but it's not working at the top. Um, it's still beta. Give them some time to figure it out. But I agree with you right now. Like, if they're not doing something major to the MMR system besides just fixing the bug, and it's not even a bug. Like, what I think they're from all I read about this, it seems like they're going to put a floor, and so that will mitigate the issue, but it won't eliminate the issue, and the whole
No.
system is still freaking skewed anyway.
Yep.
And that's beyond the fact that there's a grind happening. Like it's just I don't know. They need to overhaul some stuff, and I don't know if they're doing it, but we'll see what happens. Um,
If all they're doing is eliminating these floors, which created that really bad situation, right?
mhm.
Um, there are still ways in
Yeah.
which you can, uh, I wouldn't say exploit, but
No, you
game
can
the system.
exploit. That is
Yeah, you
exploiting.
can exploit. Yeah, yeah.
You won't
That
be
you
able
can
to. It won't
exploit.
look anywhere near as bad as it does right now, right?
No,
So
but
like you would, and I think the idea is if you're an exploiter and you're not anywhere near Victor's skill level, you're still not going to beat Victor even after the exploit. But you may be like 2,000 MMR higher than you should be.
yeah, yeah, it's very
Um,
possible.
so yeah, that's what happens when you don't fix an MMR system. All right, well, battleground stuff, we don't know what's happening yet. We'll know later. Arena stuff, we assume that it's going to be class balanced. We don't know how they're going to achieve it yet. I think it's safe to say that Demon Hunter and Warlock and Hunter are going to look very different after Monday. So, and the other classes maybe not that much different, maybe like just a little bit of adjustment, but it will be interesting. But we don't know much about it, so there's not much to really like say on it. I want to get one word in before we end the topic on the difference between the two MMRs. There's an internal MMR and an external MMR, which is ratings. In Battlegrounds, you get to see the ratings, you don't see the internal MMR. This is extremely popular in many, many games, not just Blizzard, not just Hearthstone, and it's done this way not for you, and not for us. It's not done this way for the top. It's done this way to keep players incentivized to play the game. The vast majority of players who are like not in the top 1% of players. Um, and so one of the ways that some game companies are solving the issue is they past a certain level of like, oh, you made it, right? They change the internal MMR. I mean, they change the external MMR. So they're either just showing rank. Like, I mean, Hearthstone does it, right? Like, that's what, like, Constructed does. They just start showing your rank at a certain point. Or they just get rid of the external MMR. They just show you the internal MMR. Or some, like, variation of the internal MMR that's like scaled exactly precisely the same way. So it goes up, it goes down depending on like, what the MMR is doing, not based on whether you're winning or losing necessarily. But the reason that there's a split is because normal players don't like that. It's been shown repeatedly that if you give people a regular MMR system, like even in a very simple like system like a chess system or just like a 1v1 kind of, you win, you lose, YOLO system. People don't like it. They get confused. They're not incentivized to keep playing. So that's why there's an external MMR. It's so they can sell the game and make you happy. And by you, I mean the vast majority of players, maybe not you specifically. And so from like a game design perspective, I think it's a no-brainer to use an external MMR that's different from an internal MMR. Like, what we're kind of asking for is for the system to change for the top 1%. Because
Yeah.
no one in the top likes an external MMR because they don't care at that point, right? They're like beyond the illusion. And at that point, you've also played the game so much that the MMR system is not what's going to keep you like tethered to like playing the game, especially an MMR system that's purposefully making your real skill indicator like obscured. So like what the general community is asking for is some kind of switch at the very top, so that you can have a better, you know.
It's very true. Here's the thing: if you are basically, if you suck or if you're just mediocre, you don't want to know that.
Yeah. Even
Or
if you're good, you don't want to know how good you are.
yeah,
Like, you
but
have
if
to
you're
be really good to want to know how
right,
good you are. Like, you may
yeah,
think you want to know how good you are, but the vast majority of players who think
you
they
don't.
want to know how good they are and are legitimately good players still react negatively to knowing exactly how good they are. Like, they play the
Yeah,
game less, they pay less money for the game, like, you know, just bad things. Proven repeatedly over many, many years.
right. But if you give them layers, if you give them, for lack of better terms, excuses,
Yep.
that's good. People like excuses, right? Especially when it is quote out of their control. It's like, well, I can't do anything, right? This is just the way the system
Mm-hmm.
is. And my internal MMR, I don't know what it is like, but I'm sure it's higher. I'm sure it's higher, right? Like I'm sure it's definitely higher. But for other people, like God, these cheaters.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
everybody in plat thinks they're diamond, right?
of
Everyone in
course,
gold thinks they're diamond. Everyone in diamond thinks they should be in masters. I think like
that
around masters, you actually have people who think that they belong in masters and like not grandmasters. But I think in every step below that, you'll find like if not the majority, at least a very heavy minority of players who honestly believe that the rating system is just screwing them over and they should be like significantly higher than they are.
the turning point in any game is and kind of life and kind of learning a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuff in general is when you're good enough to know exactly how crappy you are.
Yeah.
Um that's and that's a really sad moment. Like so with me in Battlegrounds, I'm kind of there right now. Like I'm good enough to and look, the leaderboard say I'm like 140 in
Mm-hmm.
NA, right? Which is really good.
Yeah, and you've
Uh,
been there like every time you've played the game in a significant period of time, you've been top 100. Like
right,
every
right.
single meta that you've like kind of tried it, you've been top
Yeah, I've
100.
tried it, sure.
So
Yeah,
I think that's
I've
pretty
been
consistent. Um,
but I'm just good enough to like watch Dog's Khadgar transition or to watch Victor's game plan or to watch like Lee and his like methodical play or
mhm,
Collins and how he like, breaks it down. And I'm just like, God, I am not there.
yeah.
I'm just like not there yet, and
Mhm,
like um and then I can appreciate that a little bit more. And it's like, everyone can look at a Khadgar transition and be like, oh, that was awesome. And yeah, it all made sense. But to actually see them and then the way that they're thinking of it, it's like I'm good enough to understand it, but it's like disheartening where I'm just like, okay, that's beyond me right now. Maybe I can get there, but that would take a lot of work, and I'm it's like so far away. It's so far away right now.
yep.
Yeah,
Yep. And I mean that's what you. It's always good to recognize what you don't know, right? Whether by looking at other people or just by like looking at the game itself, right? Like I don't watch a lot of other people play, but when I was playing Battlegrounds, at first I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting, and then I was like, oh, this is actually pretty deep. And then I hit the level, and I just played by myself. I didn't watch anyone play or anything. But then, and I wasn't like particularly good at that point. And then I got to the point where I was like, oh my god, all these variations and strategies and things and ways you have to adjust in the middle make such a big difference. Who's in your lobby makes such a difference. Like all, and it all kind of like hit me, like just how complicated and skillful this game is, and how I was nowhere near like that skill cap. Like that hits me pretty early on with games. I feel like I'm very good at evaluating how bad I am, which is why I'm also extremely confident when I think I'm good at something, because I know that I've been beyond my harshest critic in my head. So, like if you hear me talk about something, like I know what I'm talking about, I really think I know what I'm talking about, because the vast majority of things I will be very honest to say I know very little about. Right? Like I surprised myself. I was top 200 in Battlegrounds. That was surprising to me. I didn't think I could have
surprising for a lot
possibly
of
got
people.
there.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it should have surprised a lot of people, because even as I was getting there, I see the misplays I make. Many, many misplays every single game. So it just shows you that like Battlegrounds right now, and maybe forever, because Battlegrounds is a really complicated game, and there are so many decisions to make every single game. Like maybe you can have a misplay rate of like 5% at least, if not 10%, and still be top 200 like forever. That's entirely possible because it's been a year now, right? The player base has gotten better at Battlegrounds, and yet, like I feel like if you have a 5% error rate where you just make a misplay every 20 plays, you'll be top 200 no problem. So it's a good thing in a game to allow you to have a little bit of misplays. If you have to play an actual perfect game to do well in a game, I feel like at that point it gets too like technical, and it really takes away from the fun. Like one of the good parts about having all of these like RNG and like whatever stuff that goes on, and why we're doing this instead of chess, is because like this is the kind of stuff that makes it fun. Like not being able to 100% know whether you're making a misplay or not, being allowed to make misplays, and then being able to recover by being like slightly better at predicting the risk than than someone else. Like those 51-49% plays, right? Like they add up. You may lose on a 60-40 play that you misevaluate and lose 20%, but if in the other 100 plays that you made, 20 of them you were 1% better, 10 of them you were 1% better, you've made up for your misplay. You're quite clear misplay. A 60-40 misplay is a pretty significant like misplay. Yeah, like a good player wouldn't argue that a 40-60 misplay was a misplay. Whereas a 51-49% misplay is like no one knows. Like there's too many things going on. Like no one will ever be able to convince me that I made a misplay on 49% to 51%. And frankly, like you can't think of those misplays on a play-by-play basis. At that point, you have to just start applying big picture concepts, and you're changing your big picture concepts slightly and hoping that it improves more of those 51-49s than it loses, because every time you tweak it, it'll improve some and lose them. Anyway, my point is it's definitely an interesting thing, like how your brain reacts and what you're incentivized by, and how skill works in the game. And for most people, whether you think so or not, you will enjoy the game better, and you will play the game more, and you will get better at the game by not truly knowing your MMR, and instead having this like smoothed out version of your MMR. And I'm in the same boat. Like I don't actually want to know my MMR until I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, I'm good at this game. Like give it to me now, right? Like if you put, it's just like to the extent that I care about my MMR at all, I'm okay with the smoothed out version until at the very top. Okay, so kind of going from there with this kind of overall game, how you deal with the game concept. We're playing a game of chance, whether it's Arena or Battlegrounds. Hearthstone's a game of chance, and in a game of chance, you will low roll sometimes, quite frequently. In fact, you will low roll like half the time, right? Half the time you'll get something below average. That's just what it is. Maybe like put a cutoff, maybe like say a quarter of the time you get like something that's like you would consider like bad, not just like below average, right? But like actually bad. In Arena, you may get a bad deck, or you may have been getting like a decent draft, but you went for something and it didn't hit, right? Like you kind of committed to a combo that you had one piece of, and it would have been a great deck if you get like, if you can get 3 pieces and you ended up with just your 1 piece. And so now you have 1 trigger to your combo that's game winning, and you're like, the rest of the deck didn't quite come together. For Battlegrounds, some heroes suck. You can be offered 4 heroes and they could all suck. And as the gap between the best heroes and the worst heroes are actually widening, even though they are fixing up some of the worst heroes, the other ones are still in the game, and you will just sometimes have to play a mediocre hero. In Arena, that is hopefully not going to be the case on Monday. But even generally, right? Even if you get 3 crappy heroes, you're still at a much more respectable win rate than Battlegrounds. In your hero diversity. But either way, we want to talk about how you deal with low rolls in general. Like your mindset, what you do. Like there's this difference of how you treat something when you already know you low rolled. So we're not talking about like, oh, I played into a Flame Strike because I had to, or like, well, my opponent played this huge RNG card and it just really hit and I lost the game, right? It's not, or like, oh, I know my deck sucks against Rogue and Demon Hunter and is great against every other class, and I just got terrible matchups throughout. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you got the setup and you know you suck. Like, you just know. You have a deck, it comes out. If you're using arena drafts, you can tell the percentile, and it's telling you that you have a value of like bottom 10 percentile, and then you're looking at your deck and you're missing parts of the curve, and you don't really have combos, and you're like, well, it's just a trash deck, right? You're in Battlegrounds, you get offered a whole bunch of heroes, none of them are higher than like 4.5. You know you're not having a great time in your Battlegrounds run. So assuming you're not retiring decks just right off the bat, and you're going to play through them, and I think it's you improve a lot by doing this. And the same with Battlegrounds. I think you really learn a lot of the fundamentals of Battlegrounds when you start playing like either bad heroes or very combo heavy heroes or very fundamentals heroes. Because, and if the hero's bad enough, then it essentially becomes a fundamentals hero because its hero power stops doing stuff. So you have to rely on your fundamentals, and it really helps you like know the meta better, I think. So I always like to play my low roll decks. I'm not saying I actively enjoy it when I'm playing it, but I know it makes me a better player. And you've been listening to this podcast for a while, presumably. You know what in Arena what we're talking about. In Arena, I always go for 5 wins. If I know I have a crap deck, I think I can bring any deck to 5 wins on average. I'll obviously get runs below 5, but if I identify a series of decks as being the bottom 20 percentile decks, I will still average 5 wins with them overall. And yeah, so you wanna talk about Battlegrounds, or we want to talk about Arena first?
Sure, we can talk about Arena first, like because I feel like you've been setting it up for Arena a little bit more. So yeah,
So in this Arena environment, especially now when the quality of decks is actually quite different, there are a lot of very good decks, and there are a ton of just kind of broken and bad decks. And so you will be playing quite a number of decks. I feel like, especially compared to like 4 months ago, the decks you have just aren't as good most often. Like, just stuff is missing. Your curve is less secure than it was before. The game is more swingy now, and you may just miss out on the swing cards and the swing combos. And so you just kind of have a deck that doesn't quite function the way you kind of want it to. And you know, after you draft it, that this deck is never going 12, ever. You could be the luckiest person in the world, you will not get 12 wins with this deck. You're going to hit a wall at like maybe 9 wins tops. But really, this deck is going to struggle to make it to 5 wins. And it's not that hard to identify it. Like, we all know bad decks when we see it. So one thing is, for the future, try to like see what you could have done in the draft to maybe make it less bad of a deck. But let's say the draft is already over. Here's how you play a bad deck. You play a bad deck first by getting into the right mentality. And the right mentality in Arena is that everyone else is rolling around with bad decks too. The fail rate of decks is at a very high point right now compared to most played times in Arena history. Like, decks these days, the bad ones, are bad compared to the good ones. It's like the rich is getting richer and the poor is getting poorer. So if you rolled a poor run, like, don't worry. There's plenty of other people rolling crap that with drafts that, you know, you're not... You would look at it and be like, oh, my deck is actually decent compared to that. There are also plenty of people who are playing the Arena because they're using up their tickets, right? You get a consistent like source now and then of some like Arena tickets now in the Battle Pass, or they just are bad players, or they're new players. I don't think any new players is playing the Arena, but certainly experienced players aren't playing the Arena. So the fact that there are some people playing the Arena, I feel like there's actually probably a decent percentage of players who are new at Hearthstone and don't know that Arena is not getting the attention that it should, and so like are testing all the game modes and decide they like Arena. I don't know. But I have faced a much higher percentage of bad players in the last few weeks than I normally do in the first month of a expansion launch as well. I think it kind of has to do with the fact that people are generally better when their decks are more normal or like just better. And in this meta, there's a higher percentage of decks that are abnormal and or just plain bad. And then as an okay player, you just like know how to deal with it a lot less than like a good player knows how to deal with it. And a bad player would just kind of do bad with anything, right? Outside of the top decks. So you're ending up facing opponents that I feel like have a lot more weaknesses. Like they're making more misplays at a higher rate than they normally do. So just mentally prepare yourself that, hey, look, the 2-loss meta is real easy right now. There is just all sorts of trash floating around there. So your deck can go pretty far, even if it is trash. Like as long as you don't play trash. Which brings me to the second point. You have to not play trashy. So a lot of times I would draft a deck that I think is like not particularly great, maybe not terrible, but not great. And I would get a lot of questions from chat that's like, hey, what is the win condition? How do we win? Like, this deck doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. It's, not big enough, not fast enough, not whatever. And one of the reasons that happens to me is because I don't go for combos that much, and I like a mid-range game, so more of my decks will fall into, like, a kind of mid-range that I think most people were drafting. But also, being in the mid-range is not that bad. Like, I take these decks to like 6-7 wins pretty regularly, like on average, and then sometimes they spike up to 9, and people get scared that like they lost all their grass that they bet because they didn't think the decks would go so far. And mid-range decks can still work in this meta, not because I'm drafting a great mid-range deck or anything. These are like semi-failed decks or just like super low roll decks, but it's fundamentals. Fundamentals still work. And I'm not talking about just the like, oh, curve stone, how you trade them, whatever, but also just that basic recognition of where you are in the game, right? Like, am I beating my opponent? Am I not beating my opponent? And if your deck really isn't going anywhere and has no win condition, just know that you always have to beat your opponent, right? Like, if your deck is bad, you have to be the aggressor. Because if you just kind of let the game go on, you will lose because your deck is bad. Like, if your deck is actually bad. So put the pressure on, sneak some damage to your opponent's face, find awkwardnesses in your opponent by getting reads. Your opponent, like especially in this kind of like meta, has a lot of initiative, right? So any kind of read, the most important read in this entire meta is my opponent is out of initiative. This usually won't happen if you're playing a good deck and you're at a higher win rate, because your opponent will just have endless initiative because this is the meta. But with bad decks, and like, just like when you're at 2-2 or like, even like 3-2 or like 4-2, most of your opponents will run out of initiative at some point in the game. If you identify that turn and then you just push right afterwards, you'll get a lot of good results, right? Or you identify that turn and that's when you drop your like one possible bomb. So be aggressive and know this turning point. Like, I think that is super, super important in this meta, but in really any meta when you low roll a deck. Like, if you recognize that your deck is not going to get there, you have to make sure that you're taking the appropriate risks. And if you know that your deck is bad, like if I have a good deck, I'm thinking like 9 wins, which means it's a 3-1 risk, which means if I take a big risk that can make me lose the game, that risk needs to pay off 3 times in order for me to keep my win rate. That's how it works for a good player. But if I expect my deck to go like 6 wins, then it drops down to 2-1. And I have much more leeway to take that kind of risk, right? The game-winning risks. So if you're like, and I'm using myself as an example, but if you're like a lower win rate player, the ratio is the same, right? Like if you're normally a 5-win player and you're trying to get 3 wins with a bad deck, same deal, right? You're going from 5-3 to 3-3. Your risk reward ratios are consistent. So I think that's the substantive part of how to deal with a low roll deck, because I've had more success. Like I was having not a lot of success with low roll decks earlier on in the meta, and then I kind of figured out the meta more, and now I'm having more success than I was before with low roll decks. I'm still like not getting good decks as often as I feel like I should be. But I think also that's why I'm kind of concluding, and because of what I see, like when I'm facing my opponents, that there really just is a lot of bad and broken decks in this meta. Like I keep saying, the meta is very diverse and it's very fun to play in, even though it's not like balanced. Well, that diversity means a lot of things are kind of all over the place, and all over the place doesn't quite work, right? That's not a cohesive deck. So there's a lot of decks that fail at like managing the diversity and finding a direction to go in, which means a lot of your opponents are going to fall in that category. So if they don't have the card quality to back it up and having a really good deck, and they don't have a very clear direction, I think that's more than 75% of decks you're going to see. And so you have a very good chance of just like out fundamentaling and out getting reads and getting timings and knowing the push timings than your opponent. So yeah, that's I think that's arena in this meta for how to deal with a low roll deck.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about BGs for a little bit. And BGs, when we're talking about low rolling, you got to split it up into, I guess, two different buckets. The first bucket is when you low roll with a hero, as in your two choices or four choices, depending on whether or not you have a pass, are good heroes or bad heroes. And there's a huge disparity in the best heroes and the bad heroes, who aren't even that bad. They're just like okay, but the difference between those are quite significant right now. And then there's also low rolling in terms of just bad shops. We've all been there,
Mm-hmm.
where you go to tier 2, you only get tier 1 minions. You go to tier 3, there's only tier 1 and tier 2 minions, and you just get out tempoed. Even when you try to play for tempo, it really sucks. We've all been there before. We've experienced it. Or you have like 3 pairs, and you're just like, okay, all I have to do is triple, and then you're not getting it. So those are two different buckets, and what we want to do is separate those out for a second. Let's talk about like what happens when you have just like bad heroes first, because that's your first choice, right? Your hero. Um, if you are lucky enough to get a good hero, let's say you are able to get like an Elise, right? Or you get like an Omu or a Galakrond. Those are some of the best heroes in the game, like Millhouse. That's great. What you want to do is identify, okay, I can go for the win. Like, because of my hero power, whether it's active or passive, that's going to push me and propel me turn by turn. I'm going to gain an advantage on everyone, and by the end the advantage is going to be huge, such that I should have a decent chance of winning. If you are stuck with a hero like the Curator, which is my boy, I love the Curator, I pick
God, the
him a
curator's
lot. You
so
guys,
bad, and they
I know
just
he's
buffed him in
so
the
bad.
most meaningless way.
I know it's really the most backhanded buff. It's like, oh, we're gonna buff you, but I'd rather they had just left him alone so he was unbuffed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they can't say that they buffed him. But if you are playing Curator, what you need to do immediately is give up. Like, what you need to do immediately when you are Rat King, when you are the Curator, right? There are some bad heroes which have the potential to high roll, and you can play them a little bit differently. You definitely shouldn't give up, right? If you get like Toki, which is definitely not one of the best heroes, but has the potential to high roll, you should play her a little bit differently. I'm talking about like the curators, the Rat Kings,
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Patchwork.
like, yeah, yeah, Patchwork.
My boy that
Those.
also got a very small buff, but it was better than the curator buff.
So when I say just give up, I don't mean bottom right. What I mean is you got to start mitigating immediately. Some people may think, oh, I have Curator, I have Rat King, I need to take more risks
Mm-hmm.
because I'm weaker.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually what you shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, in order for you to get the triple slash, in order for you to try and high roll, and obviously this is different from games in which Bob just like hands you the game, right? Sometimes Bob literally just hands you the game. that's cool. It didn't even matter like which hero you were. Great. Enjoying like those 1-2% games. But in more normal games, if you just low roll the hero, um, you have to realize that it's not about any individual game. You know, you're not in a tournament here. We're just talking about the ladder. And it's about your total MMR. You know, one game is just like one hand of poker in your entire career, essentially. So it's not just about maximizing profits, it's about minimizing losses.
Mm-hmm.
And when your
That's
curator,
huge. Like,
that's huge.
because people
Yeah.
think about the risk thing you're talking about, which is totally true. But what they don't think is that your payoff is lower because your risk
Yeah.
reward like metric is different from a bad hero. Whereas your payoff is like 3 and your negative is like -1 for a good hero. For a bad hero, your negative is like -2 and your reward is like +2. So why would you take that risk, right? If you hand it to
Yeah.
you're already playing a bad hero. Stop taking risks when you're playing a bad hero. Stop making your problem worse.
Definitely. And the problem with risk taking when you're a bad hero is that in order for you to try to force yourself into a high roll in order to, to triple, to stretch yourself a little bit thin, you have to stretch yourself thinner than other heroes would have to do in order to achieve the same result on average. This is why the hero is bad. This is why a hero curator is not as good as Unleash. Like Unleash can tier up and get those great units because of her maps and her hero powers. Curator, in order to tech up at the same speed as Unleash, it's almost impossible for the curator to keep up in strength as well. So you are stretching yourself really thin. And even if you get it, you're not as powerful and you don't have the ability to sustain that as well. So that's what I really mean. Like, you just have to recognize right away, okay, if Bob gives me the game, like hands me the game and just points me in a direction and says, yeah, sure, go ahead and win this one, that's great. But if you don't have that at the beginning, yeah, like just play for tempo, right? You actually want to value pairs a little bit less than some of the other good heroes, the high roll heroes, because they're able to get that triple easier to tier up, in a more efficient way. They're able to get there faster and utilize it better
Yes.
than a crappy hero. So I'm not saying like don't try for triples at all. It's just your risk assessment and your valuations of these are going to change slightly. So, and then of course, like what you want to do is just like survive the game and then get out of there with either some positive MMR or just try not to be 8th or 7th or 6th or whatever. Do what you have to do. We're getting into a situation now in which it's like game by game and like kind of turn by turn, but just it's about the big picture here. This isn't a tournament. If it was a tournament, sure, yeah, everyone has to high roll, right? Go ahead, try for the high roll. But this is one of those games where, yeah, you got dealt a bad hand. Do the best you can with it, and yeah, it kind of sucks because it might take like a good 20 minutes of you not being
Losing
able to live out
MMR.
your dream. Yeah, but that's fine. On to the next one. Like it's you this game, and in some other game it'll be the other guy with like the patchwork or the rat king or the curator.
It's important to recognize that you are in it for your whole account. That this run is not, or like this game in Battlegrounds is not the entire thing. You don't need to win every game. You don't need to get 12 wins in every arena run. Getting 5 wins rather than like 7 wins is better than getting 3 wins rather than 7 wins. Like if we're thinking about it in terms of an average. And I know in Arena they don't track this kind of stuff, but I always play Arena as if I have an average that I'm trying to like keep up. And in Battlegrounds you actually have a rating, so they actually track it for you. So it's very clear what your negative is. And I think a lot of people have this kind of idea where like, oh, if I lose losing 40 MMR and 60 MMR is about the same. I think that's just what happens in your mind, right? They're both numbers that seem like middling, but that's the difference between a first place and a second place finish. Whereas if you get second place instead of first place and you're down to it, you're like, oh, I missed out on first. So you got to get out of that psychology and go into mitigation mode when you're in a bad spot, which starts when you have a bad hero. Yeah, like it's just like if you're thinking about it in terms of completing a comp, like a real comp, whether it's like dragons or elementals or whatever, there's always a point in which you're weak, right? Where you just get the units that are going to scale and you haven't scaled yet. Then there's a turn in which you scale up and then you're still not strong, you may be middling. And then after that, you start scaling and you get all the benefits of the scaling and then you start setting yourself up with a win. That's all well and good, but if you don't have the same multipliers on your risk reward as a good hero, what ends up happening is that valley hurts more and the payoff pays off less. Like you're still not going to get first because someone else is high rolling with a better hero. You know, you're still maybe not going to get second because two people are high rolling with better heroes. And on the other hand, you have a higher percent chance to die in that valley. So it's quite stark because you die first before you hit the rewards. So not even focused on the fact that you get lower rewards than good heroes. You just have a much higher percent chance of kind of not making it too. And that really does hurt. So yeah, like just concede. I kept talking about top 5 play like back in the day, and people were like, "You lose MMR in top 5. Does he know this? Like it's top 4. You want to get top 4, and then you don't lose MMR, not top 5." And I'm just like, no, like you don't finish on 5 if you get top 5. Like I know people shorthand it so that top X means you finish on that particular number, but all top 5 means is avoid the bottom 3 like the freaking plague, and you'll end up second or third enough times that it's going to be positive MMR. And if you're using a bad hero and you can accomplish, maybe not even top 5, maybe even top 6, because it's a lot worse now than it was when I was doing the top 5 strategy. But even if you could just do top 6 with a bad enough hero, that's a win. Because maybe you should have been averaging top 7 with that hero. Like some heroes are bad, especially true if you haven't bought, if you're not paying for Battlegrounds. If you are paying, 4 choices makes it very unlikely to get a truly bad hero, but you'll still spend a lot of time with those mediocre heroes that if you go on HS Replay, they're averaging 4.5 or whatever, rather than the places where you want to be, where they're averaging like around 4. And the heroes you face are almost all going to be heroes that average around 4 because they're the ones that get picked every time. All right. Anything else to say about low rolling? We're just getting all the negativity out before the holidays.
No. That's kind of it. And for low rolling units, what you want to think about is just doesn't matter so much for this hero. Like for example, you can low roll units as Jandis, but it doesn't really matter if you have a token. Like you can be low rolling your tempo units kind of, but like if you have a token, you're still okay, especially in the early game. So a lot of people just get frustrated. It's like, oh, why am I not getting the spawn in the Zoth? Why am I not getting the good tier 2 or tier 3 units? That's fine. Like there are tons and tons of games where you get like crappy units with a Maiev or a Jandis, but you haven't hit your power turns yet. You haven't really been able to capitalize on your insane hero powers. So that's fine. Like just be patient, let that happen. Yes, you're taking some more damage right now, but like you have a potential bright future. So don't let that get you tilted and cloud. Like I find a lot of people just get frustrated by that, and it's like, no, you're Jandis and you have a token, so you always have an opportunity there.
Yeah, and that's also key to know when you're like low rolling as a good hero, not to give up, because your risk reward may be a little worse than it was before, but it's still in the positive range that you should still be taking the risks more often than not, depending on the low roll. That's the thing we'll talk about Battlegrounds. There's so much variation in the beginning. Okay, well that's our little segment on low rolling. Let's go to card good bad. I want to talk about a card good bad that, by the win rates, I'm going to categorize it as a miss for our tier list. By experience, it's hard for me to judge. I have not been picking this card, and I have
Sucks.
seen this card be picked a lot, so I know other people are picking it, and its win rates are like decent. Like it's not a great card or anything, but it's getting. I'm gonna go on
It
Aces
sucked.
replay. Okay, but like its win rates for the average player is strikingly okay, rather than totally bad. So the card is Costume Entertainer, and it is performing about 1% lower than your Crocs and Raptors, a little less than 1% lower than your Crocs and Raptors. We have it rated at a 68, whereas Crocs and Raptors are like nearly a 100. They're like in the, yeah, they're probably, they average out to around a 100. So we have it so much worse than a Croc. But it's only a little bit worse than a Croc. 1% win rate probably equates to like 10, 15 points on our tier list normally. Of course, HS replay win rates are not particularly like good at estimating how good a card is, especially a card with a lot of RNG like Costume Entertainer. They tend to be better for bad players than for good players. But still, this is quite a big thing. So I think in the next tier list, you're going to see Costume Entertainer go up a bit. It's not going to go up to be a good card or even a card that you want to, like, you know, you're okay with putting in your deck. Because, like I said, its win rates are lower than Croc and Raptor. But it's going to be higher than where it is right now. Like, we put this as, like, a nearly unplayable card. I'm looking at our tier list right now. It's where Master Swordsmith and Kabod Geomancer is. Like, it's below a Frostwolf Grunt. This card is not that bad. It's bad.
Okay. Yeah, it's bad. It's not that bad.
Don't take
I'll agree.
it, but it's not that bad. And I kind of want to analyze why this card is not that bad. So Costume Entertainer is a neutral card. It's 2 mana, 1/2, and then it buffs a random minion in your hand by +2/+2. So if you top deck it, it's pretty much worthless. And even if you don't top deck it, you're just playing it out. It has 5 stats. Sorry, it has 7 stats. So it's getting like 2 more stats than you should have for a 2 mana card, but you're kind of losing the curve and you have no idea where you're hitting it on. So those 2 extra stats that you get compared to a Raptor or a Croc may not be able to come out for many turns after, right? It may be on a situational card that you can't, just play whenever. It may be on a like a card that just has very high mana cost that you can't play. Or it may be on your 3-drop and then you like super win out on the curve. So it's a lot of RNG built into it, but 2 stats placed random, like 2 extra stats placed randomly, and having a 1/2 body, which is generally a terrible like stat distribution on a body, it seems like it was going to be really, really, really bad. And the reason it's not so bad, I think, I have obviously nothing to back this up besides just when I have seen my opponents play this card and I have been like, oh, what do you know? This card actually did something. Is they play it early, whether on 2 or on something else, like whether on 2 when they don't have a 2-drop or later on, and then they play the other card nearly the turn after or at some other relevant curve point, so before turn 6 usually, like turn 5, turn 6 the latest, in connection, and then they like get their curve back. And it doesn't just hit a regular minion, but it hits a minion that has some kind of scaling effect. And plenty of minions have scaling effects. You have a lot of rushes, a lot of taunts, a lot of things where the stats do more than just the stats. So it involves a little bit of luck. It involves quite a good curve situation going on. And I guess if you get it towards the end game, as long as you're not fully top decking, 7 stats for a 2 mana card that you can play as a very bad 2-drop. I think as a 2-drop, it's probably worse than a 2/2. Like in terms of just like playing it as a 2-drop, but maybe not, right? Like maybe it's about the same as a 2/2 in terms of how effective it is being played on turn 2. I know that like we have underestimated it a little, and this is the kind of card, right, where I kind of want to see how it works, but I really don't want to draft a bad card because it's still going to be a below average card. I don't know. What do you think? How have you faced this? I know you probably haven't picked it.
Yeah, I faced it. No, it hasn't really done anything because I gained such an advantage on turn two, right? If they
Hmm.
play it on turn two, later on, it really doesn't matter. Like I don't really care because it's then like playing kind of like Mark of the Wild on something that they can't really control, even when they kind of can control it, right? So I just don't really care. It's like, yeah, it's just trash in my eyes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be slightly less trashy. So we keep talking about this tier list that's releasing. I was really hoping to get it out today. It did not quite come together. So we're thinking maybe Tuesday is now the next anticipatory release date for this tier list. Everything's changing. We made significant, like, huge updates to the system. There were a lot of rabbit holes to go down. Like, we really want to kind of do it right. We're not we're not doing the Blizzard MMR system thing where you're just like, oh, you put a floor here and it's fine, right? Like, now we're trying to actually find the reasons that cards are going up or down or whatever. Um, so one slight problem left, and then once we fix that, it'll be ready to go live. So you will have it, maybe not on the first day night of the new meta, but very shortly thereafter. Um, yeah, that's it for me. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's it. Looking forward to this week where we hopefully get some cool new content. That's it.
All right. So yeah, I want to give a shout out to our Patreons at patreon.com/gritandgoat. We'll give specific shout outs next week. And until then, yeah, looking forward to all the new content that is going to come and drop on Monday, which is tomorrow, which is maybe today if you're listening to this on Monday when it's released. Until next week, this is Adwicta.
This is Murder. See you guys.